Hello everyone, welcome to 141. I guess this is our first set of live lectures I'm going to actually try and do here. So in 141, I really think that there are three main topics that we're going to be studying in this class, or kind of three main sections. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to extensively talk about these things called polynomials. That's going to be the first part of the class. I would say the second part of the class is going to be a big review of Math 99. We'll talk about functions, we'll talk about exponential functions, logarithms, transformations, and then we are going to the third part we're going to talk about is what's called conic sections. So chapter 3 is our first exploration of polynomials. And the first polynomial we want to talk about, the simplest polynomial, is what we call a quadratic. And that's what 3.1 is all about here. So before we delve into this section, we need a tool first. So let's kind of write that up. So before we begin, we need a tool. And what we're going to do here is, this is really a review. What we want to do is we want to review, what's called completing the square. So we want to review completing the square. I'm an awful speller. You're going to often find me up here, maybe spelling things wrong. I'm a math major, you can make fun of me. So let's go ahead and begin. So let's just start with an example. So when we're completing the square, what we have is we'll have something of the form x squared plus 8x. And our main goal here, what we want to do with something like this, is we would like to add something to this. I guess this would be a binomial. We want to add something so it factors into a perfect square. So I guess our goal, let's write this up here, our goal is we want to add a number to x squared plus 8x, so it factors to a perfect square. And what I mean by a perfect square is I want it in the form x plus h squared. Okay, so how are we going to do this? What I would like to do is, hopefully you've seen completing the square before. I would like to show you geometrically how this is going to work and why it gets the name completing the square. Okay. So when I look at this geometrically, we should be thinking about area. So when I look at this x squared term, we should be thinking about the area of a box that has, or area of a square that has side length x by x. So when we think about x squared plus 8x, we're going to interpret this as a box with side length x and side length x. So the area of this is x squared. And what I'm going to think about here, this 8x piece, is this is going to be a box that's 8 by x. So let's go ahead and draw that. So this will be a rectangle. This will be x by 8. So geometrically what we're doing here is we're adding the area of these two different rectangles. Okay, so we're adding these together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut up these areas. And this area here will be 8x. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to kind of cut these pieces up and slap them together. Specifically right here, let's go ahead and cut this 8x box into two pieces here. So what I'll have here is I'll still have this x by x box, and over here what I'm going to be adding is a box when I cut it in half is now this will be a 4 by x and a 4 by x box. So I just cut it in half here. So hopefully we can see this. Move the camera a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this, rectangle right here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and move this piece, maybe a different color. I'm going to take this piece, and I'm actually going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to take this one, maybe a different color, maybe red. I'm going to take this one, me get a marker that works. Take this one right here, and I'm going to add that right here. So let me show you that. Okay, so I've moved the two pieces here and here. Now what we want to do here is I want to complete the square. Notice that there's this little missing piece that we want to insert right here. So let's go ahead and draw that. So notice if I were to take a little square here and put it right here, I would be completing the square. So let's think about what the area of this piece here would have to be. So the length here is 4, the length here is 4, so this is a 4 by 4 box. Its area is 4 squared. I'm going to go ahead and add it right here. So if I do that, because I redraw this picture, I now have a box in the area of this box, since it has a side length x plus 4 and another side length of x plus 4. The area here is x plus 4 squared. So if we go back to our original question here, what our job was is I want to know what should I add here to make this factor into a perfect square. What I should add here is 4 squared. And when I add a 4 squared here, this will factor perfectly into x plus 4 squared. Smiley face. Okay? So let's think about actually really what we ended up doing here when we built this. Since I had this x by x box, notice what I did here is then I had this other piece, this 8 by x. So this was 8 and this is by x. What I ended up doing is I ended up taking this 8 here, I ended up cutting it in half, and I inputted those pieces right here, and the piece I added was this 4 squared that I inputted right here to complete the square. So whenever we complete the square, what we're always going to do here is we're going to look at the coefficient in front of the x, we're going to cut that in half, we're going to square it, and when we add that, it'll factor into a perfect square. Let's do a couple examples. Examples here. Go ahead and pause the video and try these out on your own. Okay. So for this first one here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and look at this coefficient in front of x, which is a 6. I'm going to take that 6, I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to square it. So I get a 3 squared, and I'm going to go ahead and add that right here. So we're going to add a 3 squared here. Now you could add a 9 here if you'd like. I oftentimes like to leak it like a 3 squared because it helps me remember how it factors. So when we move this over here, x squared plus 6x plus 3 squared, this will now factor to x plus 3 squared. Now, a great way to check your work is to go ahead and FOIL this out. So this means x plus 3 times x plus 3. So if we FOIL this out, we'll get an x times an x. So that'll be an x squared. I'll get a x times a 3, so I'll get a plus a 3x. I'll get another 3x right here. And then I'll get a 3 times a 3. I'll get that 3 squared. So notice here, the reason I had to cut this piece in half and square it is when I FOIL this out, I'm going to get a 3x, another 3x, I get 2 of them. So the piece I need to add, I needed to cut that piece in half and square it to get this piece right here. Notice that the L in FOIL will be the 3 times 3. That's why I get the 3 squared. That's why I like to leave it as a 3 squared. It reminds me how it factors. So if I add these together, this is x squared plus 6x plus 9. This next one here, what we're going to do in a similar fashion, we're going to take the coefficient in front of x, which is a negative 12. So I'm going to take the negative 12, I'm going to cut that in half, and I'm going to square it. So what I'm going to add here is a negative 6 squared. So when I add this here, when I add a negative 6 squared. And we want to think about how this factors here. This will factor to a x. This will be a minus 6 squared. So that's how this one here will factor. And again, we could go ahead and expand this to see how it works, or see how it works. If I do x times x, I get out an x squared. X times negative 6, I get a negative 6x. I'll get another negative 6x. I'll get a negative 6 times a negative 6. So I'll be adding a negative 6 squared. So I get out the x squared minus 12x. That'll be the plus the negative 6 squared, which is exactly what we have up here. Smiley face. Okay, do this last one, x squared plus 3x. I'm going to go ahead and look at the coefficient in front of x, which is a 3. I take the 3, I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to square it. So, if I go ahead and add that piece right here, what we'll end up getting is a x, if I want to factor this, this will be x plus 3 halves squared. That's how this one here will factor. It's oftentimes why I like to leave it squared and not write this as, let's say, 9/4, because it's going to help remind me how it factors. To check how this is working, let's go ahead and FOIL this out. So this is the same as x plus 3 halves times an x plus 3 halves. So I'll get an x times an x. I'll get an x squared plus a 3 halves x plus another 3 halves x plus a 3 halves squared. Okay. So this will be x squared plus. Well, I have 3 halves, and I'm adding another 3 halves, so I'm thinking I'm taking half of 3. I'm adding another half of 3, so I have a total of 3, so I get 3x plus the 3 halves squared, which is exactly what we have right here. Again, smiley face. So I have some practice problems that are posted on WAMEC. This might be a good place to stop and try those out to make sure you have this idea down. Thanks.